Welcome to the CEO Shift with your host, Shondell Spader, owner and CEO of Spader Group. In this series, you'll hear fast, focused conversations with business leaders and experts who've made the real shifts needed to scale past the plateau. Each episode delivers CEO-level insight in 15 minutes or less, because real growth doesn't need more noise, just better decisions.
Welcome to the CEO Shift. I'm excited to have Megan Braverman, who is the owner and principal of Berbay Marketing and Public Relations, here with us today. She leads a national award-winning agency specializing in creating the visibility and credibility that fuels revenue growth for law, finance, and real estate firms. She works closely with clients as a strategic partner, trusted advisor, and creative asset, helping them to exceed their business objectives and stand out in competitive markets. Whether it's securing high-impact media coverage, launching in a new market, or developing a content program, their work is always tied to measurable business goals. Megan, thank you so much for being on with me today. I'm really excited to dive into all that you have to share with us today.
Thanks, Shondell. Happy to be here.
Good deal. The first thing I always want to dive into is like why we're here, right? Like we want to know from you, what is your zone of genius and the area of expertise? Obviously, we've covered some of it here in your bio, but for this conversation today, what do you want to focus on as your zone of genius?
Well, I can't say it's my zone of genius, but I have to say that, the years of experience that I've had, I've learned a lot of lessons. And I really believe it takes a village. As CEOs and business owners, we have to lean on each other, whether it's, how AI is going to change our business, how we should better price, how we should better service clients. I'm a big believer of just really sharing the lessons I've learned over the years of being an owner and also being a employee, because you have different lessons that you can, so having both sides of the table is really helpful.
We find that that's actually really helpful too, even whether it's with our team or with clients who have been on, both sides of that, right? Shifting from that employee mindset to ownership. And then really even that next layer of really owning that CEO role are like three different avenues. Did you find that it was difficult, or like you found challenges in shifting from that employee role into ownership? And are you noticing a different level from ownership to really owning that CEO role for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think the shift from principal and running the agency to CEO and full owner was actually the smallest change because I felt like I was already doing the job, right? It was
Yeah.
kind of the previous steps that I think were the biggest. Like I like to compare it to when I first became principal, right? That was I went from a senior account manager to becoming principal. That was a big jump. And what I compare it to is if you have kids. Going from 0 to 1 is really, really hard. And going from 1 to 2 is like a little bit easier just because you've had the experience of 1. So I think the biggest shift was that senior AM to running the agency.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, the adapting to one child, I think that's a perfect analogy, right? Like we joke here that it takes a village to raise a family. It also takes a
Yeah,
village to raise a business. It is,
absolutely.
they definitely go hand in hand. What, there's so many things I want to dig into with you, and of course, we only have so much time today. But if we were to sit down and have a long conversation about like what you're most passionate about and about sharing with others and just to like move them forward in their own roles and their whether it's their agencies or their businesses, what stands out for you?
Yeah, so I think over the years, this changes, right? Your
Mhm.
focus maybe a few years prior is different than it is today. So I'll just talk about what my focus is today. And one of my passions and focus is around scalability. And this really comes from, you know, taking what we consider individual knowledge. Like my whole team, we all bring different knowledge. We bring different skill sets to the table. And that's the individual knowledge. But how do you make that tribal knowledge, right? How do you
Yeah.
get the knowledge that really only lives in one person's head into systems that can be replicated, can be taught, can be improved over time? And I think for CEOs and business owners, this really means just creating very clear processes, documenting institutional knowledge. That's been a really big thing for Burbay in the last year, is documenting like everything that we know in grave detail. And it's decentralizing that expertise so the business isn't dependent on a few key players.
Mhm.
And so we've really spent a lot of time and effort and sweat and tears into kind of creating these, what I would like to call playbooks, right? And it really is going to help us in so many ways. I mean, not only training was a big one, right? Because um, the training is only as good as your trainer, right? And so I think growth can become a lot more sustainable that way. I think that onboarding is much more efficient and faster. And I think just generally the firm is more resilient. And, I feel like I can go on vacation for a few weeks and not feel like I need to be tapped for certain things, right? And so
Yeah.
just creating that infrastructure has been really one of my passions over the last, I would say, year.
That's awesome. So it's funny you touch on the documentation and the processes and just making sure that all of that is happening. So one of the solutions that we've implemented recently, so this year, to really harvesting that institutional knowledge and not having it just be one individual had this experience and brings this in, is we've started doing an internal weekly kind of other people, like if it was outward, people would call it like an open office hours, but we kind of do that internally, right? And we call it the knowledge drop,
Hmm.
where we're coming in and we're sharing, was there a struggle that we overcame this week? Was there something that went really, really well? Are you currently experiencing a struggle that you need other people's help with? And then Sheila from our team, she's our operations manager. She sits in on those. And if she's not available, she'll listen to the recordings, but she will come in and capture like, oh, is this a one-off kind of thing, or is this something we need to start working on and documenting? Like everybody had input, everybody had good ideas, everybody, let's kind of sync this up so that everybody's operating in the same manner. And that has been a game changer, I feel like, for our team this year recently. So
Yeah, sharing knowledge is really important. And you have to
yeah.
be really intentional about it because you forget when you're in your day to day. And there are certain
Mhm.
things that happen, I think, over the course of the day that none of the other team members know is going on, but it can be so applicable to what they're dealing with. So I think it's really, just to be intentional about it is difficult but important.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't an idea. I've attended open office hours with others before, right? But I never thought to do it internally. And when that idea sparked, like it was just so fun, and it's been one that was really easy to even implement. So um,
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely.
I think that's part of helping that scalability, like you
Hmm.
touched on earlier. Um, what do you have any, like mindset shifts that you've experienced yourself or witnessed, or different strategies that you'd like to highlight today?
I think I've had some I guess I've had some epiphanies over the last year or so because, I mean, first of all, I'm a really creative person. And so, that's
Mhm.
why I went into the marketing field and it's what I love to do. But I think I will challenge myself a lot in my thinking and my perspective and just kind of to look at things from a different vantage point. I think that AI, you can't go a day without hearing AI at least 5 times. I really feel like that has been a big shift in my head. So, you know, when artificial intelligence really first, there was a lot of chatter about AI a couple of years ago, and this was sort of like the onset of all this of everything going on. And in the beginning, everyone's like, it's going to be this like monumental change, and it's going to replace everyone's jobs, and everyone was terrified. And AI has been here for a while. It's just slowly getting more and more a part of our
Right.
lives. And in the beginning, really just, I sort of didn't believe any of that. I was like, okay, yes, it's going to be great and we're going to be able to use it. I really and I wasn't anti. I was more, I'm not necessarily the early adopter, but maybe I don't know what the phases are, but I'm maybe like a phase or two after early adopters. But I think my shift is really how I see AI, which is I see AI as a tool, right?
Yeah.
I'm still not a believer that's going to come in and replace everything that is human, right? I do think it will
Right.
replace some things, but I think that it is a really, really powerful tool, whether it's whether it's helping with just general efficiencies, like going back to scalability, when we were documenting processes, AI was
Yeah.
such a big help, right? And it
Yep.
saved an immense amount of hours. Just what we would do is like brain dumps of our individual knowledge
Yeah.
into, we used Otter, and Otter would spit out, a summary, and we would say, okay, make this in this format, in this standard for our wiki. We have a wiki of all of our standards and processes. And without that, I mean, we would have been here for another several years working on that same
Right.
thing. So I think it was like a shift in like how I could really use it to create efficiencies, to speed up work. Um, and again, I do feel like still, there's always a human hand on the wheel directing it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of opened up a new world for me and for my agency, and like how we can use it as a better tool. And again, this isn't just going and finding the new AI tool or software that you can use. Everything that you use, even Word, right? The most basic
Yep.
thing has an AI component. And
Yes.
what we started to do, instead of going out and like hiring a director of AI or buying this really expensive technology, what we started to do is using AI with the technology we did have. And we saw that it was like it was a tool. It was much more than a tool. So I think my perspective on AI has shifted a lot, and I'm just a lot more open to what it can do without hurting the integrity of our work, right? Because that was my big thing. I'm like, it can't write for us, and it can't. It still cannot, right?
Right. Right.
But it can help in a lot of ways. So
So the writing component, that's interesting you use that. So that's kind of where I get hung up, right? Like my brain lives in the very black and white, 2 + 2 is 4, and there isn't any of that ambiguity in math, right? Like it either is or
yeah,
isn't, it balances or it doesn't. So when it came to, you know, our marketing team saying, okay, Chandel, we need this from you, we need that from you, and I'm in a complete stare down with a blank sheet of paper. For me, I started utilizing it as prompters, right? Like,
yeah,
okay, they tell me they want me to write about this, and we fed it the information about Spader Group, myself, my background, those kinds of
hmm
things, whatever. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so helpful. And over the last probably year, I've spent some very intentional time getting much more comfortable with it. Fully agree. It's not going to replace what we do. Um, it's going to enhance what we do. If the team will utilize it, to I don't even want to say shortcut because honestly, I don't think it's a shortcut. Sometimes you think a shortcut and it's like, oh, it's like half the quality. And it's not.
yeah,
I just think it's enhancing what we're doing, allowing us to do it faster, more efficiently, and get to a better outcome,
yeah,
without it taking weeks.
yeah.
So,
Absolutely. It's efficiencies. Certainly, that would be the word that I would use. And
yeah.
um, I want to mention one other thing because you asked me like what has changed about my mindset. And I do
Yeah.
want to mention one other thing because I think this is important. Um, we are living in an environment that is constantly changing, right? And
Yeah.
it's a really unpredictable landscape right now, and people are really nervous. I mean, I
Mhm.
compare it to even just when COVID happened and the pandemic, right? There was so much uncertainty and so much change, and it was really scary. And I feel like we're in a constant state of change.
Yeah.
And my mindset has changed so drastically on that to just be comfortable in just the neck breaking pace of which things happen and the change, and not looking at it like these events, right? A pandemic
Yeah.
or a potential recession or, all of sort of the political and worldly things that are going on. It's more of like, as CEOs and business owners, you have to be comfortable in just a very uncertain, unpredictable, constantly changing environment. And before, I sort of had to build up my resiliency for that moment. I'm like, okay, it's the pandemic, what do I do? How do we work
Mm.
virtually? How do we do that? Like, what do we do? You know, um,
But the other shoe's going to drop.
exactly. And you can kind of quickly spiral, right? And I think
Yeah.
that leaders need to recognize that you need to just like be okay with change and like be comfortable in your discomfort.
Yeah.
And I've really like just been able to shift my mind of like this is it. This is the world we live in. And it's not going to change. This is just how it's going to be and just be comfortable in it versus like, kind of letting it drain you so much. I know that's easier said than
Hmm.
done, right? Because we all face different
Well, right.
challenges. And, in the service business, we weren't as affected by tariffs, let's say. And so if you're in in a different line of business, that might have been a huge impact. And so it's not to say you
Right.
can't react to events, but I just am really comfortable in like, this is what it's going to be for forever.
Yeah, it took me a while as well to like wrap my head around the fact of like, okay, we're going to get something, we're going to work really hard on it, we're going to get it done, and we're going to start it, and then the world's going to change again. And whether the world is the literal world or the Spader Group world, like being comfortable in that change, I think that should be like lesson 101, right? Like get
Right.
comfortable with change. You want to turn into, start your own business, become a CEO, get really, really exceptionally comfortable with change. Because if
Yep.
you're not changing, then you're also not evolving, right? So an
Right.
unchanging business, whether it's just internal changes or again, things outside of our control, if things aren't changing, you're stagnant. And
Yeah.
that isn't a great place to be either. Even for folks who aren't interested in growing beyond what they've achieved, like there's still change within that business who is like, I am really good at the levels I'm at. I've achieved all I want to, and I want to sustain this level. There's still change.
Right.
So,
Change means it's necessary for growth. And I think
yeah,
a lot of us can struggle with it, whether it's like the fear of something new or like lack of time or just other resistance. But I do feel like that is, it's like, how can you not change with how much technology is changing and
right.
AI? And like, if you want to scale, like that you have to change, right? Change is
Yep.
also innovation, right? That's like
Yeah.
it's not how we always have done it. That's not okay. We need to like kind of think outside of the box. And I do think that in my opinion, it's essential to like just long-term sustainability and scalability.
Yeah. Even the way I ran Spader Group 11 years ago when we first started, right? Like I we've had to have adopted different ways of doing things because of growth and the way that we show up and what we're offering and how we're doing things and
Yeah.
all of it. So,
Yeah.
well, this has been awesome, Megan. Thank you so much for joining me today. How can folks be in touch with you if they wanted to learn more about you and Berbay and dive in?
Sure. So my email is Megan at Berbay, Megan. And my website, which we post a lot of thought leadership articles and blogs on, various marketing and PR topics, is berbay.com. I'm also on all the platforms, LinkedIn,
Perfect.
X, Instagram. So you can follow us there, and I would welcome a conversation with anyone. I'm a big believer of helping other owners and leaders. And so I would be nothing without my tribe. So I offer anyone, time on the phone or a Zoom to talk. So it's one of my pleasures.
Awesome. Well, Megan, it has been my pleasure having you here today. So thank you again so much. And I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thanks, Shondell.
Take
Thanks for tuning in to the CEO Shift. Ready to take your next step as a strategic CEO? Download our free 4-step CEO decision guide, the exact framework business leaders use to stop spinning their wheels and start scaling with clarity. Grab your copy at spadergroup.com/CEO-guide and start making decisions like a CEO today.